Hi everyone, this is Nia and today I'll be painting these mini Christmassy houses. You can paint this on your sketchbook or like me turn this into a Christmas card instead. This is my first time painting in this style and I love it so much, and I hope you do too because I'm thinking of maybe painting more houses or storefronts with this style in the future. I want to paint the houses as clean as possible, so before painting it out, I just sketched out a few houses with different variations just to get some ideas out of my head. Sometimes before I paint, I just have so many ideas and it becomes really messy in my head. And if I don't sketch them out, I get kind of confused when I draw them straight on the paper I'm painting on. So this is always a great way to figure out and visualize the ideas so it becomes clearer. This way I don't have to care so much about drawing neatly either. I'm just sketching it out very roughly and quickly. I don't even care to erase mistakes sometimes. This is just a very quick process. I ended up drawing a few different variations and it might not even be exactly the same as what I paint later, but it's much easier this way to mix and match the elements once I have them all down on paper. So I ended up making 4 sketches, but depending on the ideas you have, you might even want to sketch out more or less than what I'm doing here. I'm going to use these ideas and combine it into 2 buildings, but you can of course make a larger set for your Christmas cards as well. Next, I'm going to go over the colors. This is Bleed Proof White by Dr. Paige Martens, Prussian Blue by Holbein, Grey of Grey by Holbein, Burnt Umber by Holbein, Titanium Gold Ochre by Schmincke, Terre Verte by Holbein, Vermilion by Holbein, and New Gamboge by Daniel Smith. Since I want this to be painted cleanly with clean edges and no pencil outlines visible, I'm just going to rule out the space so the size of the building can be placed right at the center of the page. This way I can also minimize the lines that I draw for the outline. To draw out the roof, I want to first find the center at the top of the rectangle that I drew out. Then I just try to make sure that it's more or less even on both sides. While doing this, I have the sketches that I drew out earlier right in front of me. This way I can get to the design of the house straight away, and of course because the attic is placed right at the part of the roof. After that though, I just want to divide up the remaining space so I can create the first and second floor evenly. So now all there is to it is to just draw out the details of the window, door, and vegetation. Here I'm drawing out the windows first, just to make sure I get them evenly spaced out. Then I erase the bottom part of the window so I can leave a bit of space for the vegetation or the plants. To indicate the space for the plants, I just drew out a scribble for the outline very lightly. This way, as I paint later, the pencil sketch won't show through. Next, I'm just going to do the same for the ground floor. I want to place a pine tree on the left side of the building, so I erased an area of that line and just drew it out very lightly. On the right hand side, I also want to draw out a pot of plants, so I did the same thing for the right hand side. Before I start painting, I want to make sure I erase the unnecessary lines. Then I'm going to begin by painting the greeneries by first using a mix of Terre Verte and New Gamboge in a thick consistency. I'm going to paint the pine tree in sections. As you can see, I'm just trying to fill the space in between and also leave out white space in between those brush strokes. This way the paint doesn't all blend together, and I'm just going to leave this to dry before I fill in those gaps. While I have this green ready on my palette, I'm going to use the same mixture to paint the vegetation or the plants outside the windows as well. And I'm just twirling my brush around to give the curvy round edges of the plants. After that, I just want to make sure the greeneries are completely dry before I move on to the next color so the green doesn't bleed out. Next, I'm going to paint the windows, and for that I'm going to use a mix of gray and Prussian blue. Just like the greeneries, I'm going to use a thick consistency of this pastel blue, and I'm just going over the whole area of the window, including the little sections that I drew out earlier. But because this color is light enough, I can still see the pencil sketch through the paint. This way I can just layer on the details with paint later by following the pencil marks. The next thing I'm going to paint is the base color of the house. For this, I'm going to use titanium gold ochre mixed with new Gamboge. And just like before, I want to make sure all the windows are completely dry. For me, the window at the bottom was still a little bit wet, which is why I'm starting from the top. But to make sure everything's completely dry, you can also use the hair dryer. I'm just about finished covering the base of the house, and I just want to make sure all the lines are as clean as possible, especially around the edges of the house. Next here, I'm mixing up a brown from Vermilion and Burnt Umber. I'm going to use this to paint the pot on the right hand side as well as the pine tree trunk. I also glazed over the pine tree using the same green mixture from Terre, Verte and new Gamboge in a light consistency to fill in the gaps of the pine tree. I'm going to go back to the brown mix from Burnt Umber and Vermilion, and I'm using a thick consistency to paint the crosses underneath the windows. I'm also going to paint the door using the same color. To make it look more Christmassy, I'm going to add some red dots on top of the plant, so I'm going to use a thick consistency of Vermilion and just dot it around randomly for each of those plants. I ended up using the same brown mix from Burnt Umber and Vermilion to paint the roof. Then after that, I also added more dots, this time to the pine tree and also to the potted plant on the right hand side. Next, I want to create a dark brown by using the same mix with added Burnt Umber and this time with Prussian blue to make the brown muted and darker. I'm going to use this brown to line the X's that I drew out as decoration underneath the windows and also to line the outer part of the roof, but I want to line it thinly in comparison to the lighter brown that I painted earlier. I'm also going to create a frame all around the building on the left, right, and also at the bottom, except where the door is. Still using the same brown, I'm going to add an outline at the top of the door and also right in the middle. As for the line in the middle, I want to make sure it's very thin to separate the double doors. Here I added bleed-proof white to the yellow mixture for the building, and this is just to create the doorknobs. While I still have bleed-proof white on my palette, I'm going to use a thick consistency to paint the outer part of the window frames. I'm going to line them fairly thick for every single one. Then I'm going to go back in with a lighter load on my brush to paint thinner lines for the detail of the window frames. You can switch to a smaller brush or a liner brush to paint the thinner lines, or you can also use a white gel pen to make it much easier to control. After I finish painting all the window frames, I'm going to freehand some designs on the house just as extra decoration. For this, I'm just going to use the bleed-proof white in a thick consistency, but you can also pick more of a colorful design if you want to make yours look more festive. After looking at the picture again, I felt like the door was blending too much with the rest of the building, so I ended up adding extra lines on the left and right with the dark brown mix. Then after that, I'm just going to finish it off by erasing all the unwanted pencil marks. And that's it for the first building. Let's move on to the next one. Because I'm turning this into a set, I want the measurement to be cohesive with the first house, so I'm just going to line the first design next to me, and I can roughly estimate the measurement, making sure at least the top and the bottom has the same amount of space. I'm creating a trapezium shape for the roof, and to make it even on both sides, I measure out the space on the left and the right side from the edge of the rectangle, and I try to even it out as much as possible. For this one, I'm going to make an arched window for the attic, and then I'm going to erase the bottom part so there's a bit of space for the plant. Then, just like the previous house, I want to divide up the remaining space for the first floor and the second floor to be more or less even. I want the windows on the second floor to have shutters, so here I'm spacing out the window so I can fit 3. After that, I want to find where the center is so it's easier for me to divide up the rest of the space for the area of the window and the shutters. At the moment though, the shutters look really thin and long, so I decided to make the overall window shorter. For the first floor, I want the windows and the door to be quite large and tall. And as for the door, I added an arch just to make it cohesive with the window on the attic. I felt like the proportion of the door was a little bit too tall and thin, so I end up cutting the height down by adding stairs at the bottom. I'm really happy with this decision because I feel like it adds a bit more character to the entryway. I'm just going to keep the windows on either side of the door nice and simple, and as for the decoration, I added some potted plants underneath the window, a dried up tree on the left side of the building, and on the right hand side of the building I'm going to draw out a lamp post. Then, as a final touch-up to make the house look more Christmassy, I'm also going to add some Christmas lights. Just like the previous one, I'm going to start by painting the vegetation. I'm using the same mix of Terre Verte with new Gamboge. Again, I'm just twirling my brush in order to get the bushy texture of those plants. I want this building to have bricks, so I'm going to create a pastel brick red color mixture. For this, I used the previous dark brown mix, which has Prussian blue in it. Then I'm going to add vermilion and also a bit of titanium gold ochre. The main colors that I used here is vermilion and titanium gold ochre, which is why the color ended up looking kind of reddish orange. I added a tiny addition of the dark brown from before, which is a mixture of burnt umber, vermilion, and a tiny bit of Prussian blue to just mute this orange slightly. As you guys know, I love muted colors, which is why I added the brown. However, if you prefer more of a brighter saturated color, just use vermilion and titanium gold ochre as is without the brown. For the roof, I'm going to use Prussian blue as the main color, and then I added a tiny bit of burnt umber to mute the blue and also a little bit of vermilion. Because the value of this color is fairly dark, I'm only going to use a medium to thin consistency, and I'm using a very heavy brush load so I can spread it around the roof easily. To paint the windows, I'm just going to use the same color mixture as before from Prussian blue and gray of gray. I'm going to break up the height of the house by using this dark brown mix, just like before, from burnt umber, vermilion, and a bit of Prussian blue. As for the window frame of the attic, I'm going to use the same red mixture as the base of the building, but this time I'm using a thick consistency. As for the window shades, I'm going to use the same mixture as the roof in a thick consistency. Next, I'm going to add red dots to the plants, and for this I'm using a thick consistency of vermilion. For the pots, I'm using the same color mixture as the windows, but I'm going to add more Prussian blue so it's not as light as the windows. For the window frames, I'm going to use the same color as the window shades in a thick consistency, and I'm just going to line the outer part of the window frames first. Just to add a bit of detail, since there's a lot of space under the roof, I'm just going to add a line of brown using the same dark brown as I did for the middle of the house. There are a couple of windows for the door. As for that, I use the same mix with gray of gray and Prussian blue. As for the door itself, I'm going to use the same color as the window frames from Prussian blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of vermilion. After that, I want to paint the stairs, so I want to make sure that the door is completely dry, and I'm just going to use a hairdryer to make the process quicker. As for the stairs, I'm going to use the same dark brown mix, but this time I added more Prussian blue just to mute it down further. Here I'm just going to add some extra lines for the detail of the house. In terms of the color, I'm using the same dark blue mix as the window frames. Next, I'm going to paint the fun part, which is the brick texture. For this, I'm using the same color mixture as the building itself, but I added more burnt umber to make it a bit darker. And here I'm just painting short, thick lines to create brick textures, and I'm placing them randomly. For the dried up tree on the left, I'm going to use this color that is almost black from the dark brown mix with added Prussian blue. This brush doesn't really come to a fine point, which made it quite hard for me to draw the thin lines for these branches, but you can always switch to a small brush or a liner brush in order to control the water flow a bit better. The glass of the lamppost, I use the same color as the windows from gray of gray and Prussian blue. Then I want to make sure that the blue is completely dry before I paint the rest of the lamppost. I use the same black mix as before. And as for the extra thin lines separating the glass, I just used a pen. For the detail of the roof, I used the same dark blue mix and a thick consistency, and I first start out by drawing straight lines following the shape of the roof, and then I add small curves in between those lines until I fill the whole roof area. Here I'm using a thick consistency of bleed-proof white, and I'm just going to draw out the extra details of the window frames. Again, to paint really thin lines like this, you can always switch to a smaller brush or a liner brush, or you can also use white gel pen. For the doorknobs, I use a mix of bleed-proof white titanium gold ochre and new Gamboge. The last detail that I'm going to add are the Christmas lights. For the line of the Christmas lights, I just use my ink pen to make it quick and accurate. As for the lights, I first use a mix of bleed-proof white with new Gamboge, and I paint ovals in different directions following those curved lines. I feel like I need to strengthen the color to make it more opaque, so I'm just going to dry this off and do another layer of those ovals. So I'm happy with the opacity of the yellow. I'm going to use a thick consistency of bleed-proof white and paint on smaller ovals inside of the yellow ovals. Then to make it more glowy, I'm going to use a clean damp brush to blur out the outer edge of the white ovals. And that's it for this house. I want to make sure everything is completely dry first by using a hair dryer so I can erase the extra pencil marks. If this is just a sketchbook painting for you guys, you can finish it off here, but as for me, I'm going to add the extra Christmas greeting at the bottom. For the font, I'm just going to keep it as a simple handwriting to add to the cuteness of this painting. And as you guys know, I'm really bad with spacing, so I used a ruler to line the area where I'm going to write the greeting. Then before writing it down with pen, I used a pencil to make sure everything lands right at the center, aligned to the houses. Then I just erased the extra pencil marks and added small hearts on both sides. I have no idea why, but I just thought it was a cute addition. And that's it for these cards. I'm so happy with the result. This is the first time I've ever painted using the simplistic style, and I hope to maybe do mini storefronts in this style in the future. Like usual, the list of tools as well as my social media links will be in my description box. I'll also have the outline available in my coffee shop. If you guys are still here, thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!